Imagine, if you will, a podcast journeying beyond that which is known to man. It exists in both fandom and discovery, in viewing and critiquing. My name is Matt Hurt. Welcome to Anthology. Hello, and welcome to Anthology, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. If this is your first time listening, Anthology is a podcast exploring science fiction anthology television during TV's first golden age, beginning with the Twilight Zone. Each podcast, I share my thoughts on an episode of this iconic series as a first-time viewer, as well as share some trivia and background on the episode. I then end each podcast with a bonus review of a movie or show related to the week's episode. You can find more of Anthology at anthologypod.com, and if you want to contact me, you can tweet me at ObsessiveViewer, send an email to matt@obsessiveviewer.com, or call and leave a voicemail at 317-762-6099. Today I'll be discussing The Four of Us Are Dying. It's the 13th episode of the Twilight Zone's first season, and it aired on New Year's Day, 1960. I'll also have a bonus review of the 1976 film Logan's Run, whose source material was co-written by the writer of the short story that The Four of Us Are Dying was the basis for. As always, I'm going to start my review with an episode summary, so this will be extremely spoiler-filled, so if you haven't watched the episode yet and don't want to be spoiled, go and watch the episode and then come back. It's available on Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and all that stuff. Arch Hammer is a con man who can change his face to make it look like anyone he chooses. He walks into a nightclub where he impersonates deceased trumpeter Johnny Foster in order to steal Foster's girlfriend, a sultry singer. Hammer then pays a visit to Mr. Pennell, impersonating murdered gangster Virgil Sterig, in order to extort money out of Pennell, the man who had Sterig killed. Pennell sends his men after Hammer. Trying to escape down an alley, Hammer changes his face to one he sees on a poster of boxer Andy Marshak. But, thinking he is in the clear at a street newsstand, he runs into Marshak's father, who mistakes him for the son who broke his mother's heart and ruined a young girl's life. Hammer pushes the old man out of the way and returns to his hotel room. A detective comes to the hotel to pick him up for questioning at the police station. In order to escape from the policeman in a revolving door, Hammer assumes Marshak's appearance again. But, on the street, he again bumps into Marshak's father, who pulls a gun on him. Hammer tries to show the old man he is not who he thinks he is, but before he can concentrate and change, the old man shoots him. As Hammer lies dying, his face shifts from one person to another until he dies wearing his own face. All right, this episode had several stars, obviously, given the content of the episode. First up is Harry Towns. He played Arch Hammer in his regular form. Harry Towns appeared in one other episode of The Twilight Zone. That's Season 2's Shadow Play. He also appeared in 2 episodes of Tales of Tomorrow, 2 episodes of One Step Beyond, and 1 episode of The Outer Limits. So he's not really a stranger to fans of anthology science fiction series. He had a lot of TV credits, and an interesting piece of trivia about him is that he became an Episcopalian minister in the 70s, and he still had some acting credits well into the early 80s. So I thought that was just kind of interesting. You don't really see someone semi-retire from acting to become a minister. Appearing as Virg Sterig is Philip Pine. This was one of 2 episodes of The Twilight Zone that he appeared in. We'll next see him in Season 4's The Incredible World of I almost said Harrison Ford. The Incredible World of Horace Ford. He also appeared in 1 episode of The Outer Limits, 2 episodes of Tales of Tomorrow, 1 episode of Science Fiction Theater, and 1 episode of One Step Beyond. He was known as a dark-browed, shady-looking character actor. He played a lot of serious-minded professionals and assorted menacers and mobsters, mostly on TV during the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And he's most remembered for a role that he had in the original Star Trek TV series as the evil Colonel Green. And playing Johnny Foster is Ross Martin. This also was 1 of 2 episodes of The Twilight Zone he appeared in. We'll see him again in Season 4's Death Ship, and he also appeared in 1 episode of One Step Beyond. And this was an interesting piece of trivia about him. He was an accomplished musician. He mastered the violin, I guess, at like age 8, and played solo with a junior symphony orchestra. As Andy Marshak is Don Gordon. He's actually, as far as I can tell, he's actually still alive now. He was in 2 episodes of The Twilight Zone, this one and Season 5's The Self-Improvement of Salvador Ross. He actually played the titular character in that episode. He also appeared in 2 episodes of The Outer Limits, and another piece of interesting trivia is that he joined the Navy during World War II after Pearl Harbor, and he served on board both the USS Saratoga and the USS Yorktown. And to round out the cast, Peter Bracco played Mr. Marshak. Once again, this is one of 2 episodes of The Twilight Zone that this actor appeared in. We'll talk about him again in Season 3's Hocus Pocus and Frisbee. And he also had a role in the Twilight Zone movie, as well as 1 episode of The Outer Limits. This was interesting as well. He was a liberal-minded individual, and he was briefly blacklisted during the McCarthy era, but it didn't hurt his career in the long run. He actually went on to... his credits included Spartacus and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Writer for this episode is Rod Serling. It was based on a short story by George Clayton Johnson, who in early 1959 wrote a short story called All of Us Are Dying. It was about a guy who appears to people only as whomever they most want to see in the world. In the story, his downfall came when he goes to a gas station and the attendant recognizes him as a man he's wanted to kill for 10 years. After he wrote the story, he sent it to an agent who changed the name to Rubberface. The agent then sent it to Serling, who actually liked the original title a lot and liked the idea. So he bought it and changed the title to The Four of Us Are Dying and adapted it into a story of his own. A little bit of background on George Clayton Johnson. He was a friend of Charles Beaumont, who wrote Perchance to Dream, and he actually just recently passed away on Christmas Day of last year, 2015. This was his first credit for the Twilight Zone, but he'd go on to be one of Twilight Zone's most respected writers. He wrote 4 episodes of the series, including Season 2's Penny for Your Thoughts, which is the next one we'll discuss him in. He also wrote 2 short stories that were adapted into the Twilight Zone episodes, including Season 1's Execution, and he had 1 story by credit in the episode 90 Years Without Slumbering. As relatively little as he contributed to the Twilight Zone, he contributed quite a bit, but it still says something that he is one of the more recognizable names, or that he is one of the recognizable names from the credits of writers. Director for this episode is John Brom, who previously directed the classic episode Time Enough at Last, and also Judgment Night. This is, of course, the 3rd of 12 episodes he directed of the Twilight Zone. The next we'll talk about him is in the episodes Mirror Image and A Nice Place to Visit. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into my review of the episode and my feelings as a first-time viewer of the episode. Okay, so I was immediately taken with the scene with the mirror at the beginning of the episode, where we're shown his ability to change faces. And I just thought it was incredibly clever, because he's standing in front of a mirror, shaving with a cigarette in his mouth, and the camera pans over and shows his reflection, which is another face, which obviously it's just someone on the other side of a wall with an opening so that it's not an actual reflection, but it's all one continuous take as he shaves, and then the camera pans down as he puts the cigarette in the ashtray, then pans back up to another face. And it's just very fluid and very, very clever, a very clever and efficient special effect, if you want to call it that. I just thought it was very clever, and it really brought me into it and made me really interested in seeing how the story would progress with this character with this unique ability. And then before that, and then a couple times throughout the rest of the episode, we see him walking around outside, and it's shot from like skewed angles. And I don't know if that's to give us more of an illusion of it actually being outside, because I get the sense that it was kind of a back lot or just a set that was made to look like it was outdoors. But it's vibrant. It's got a ton of neon signs. It's really well created, and there's some extras here and there that are doing things. It was just all shot from the skewed angle, kind of from the floor up, and I don't know what the effect or what the intentional effect was, but I thought that it was handled really well, and I really enjoyed it. Now, as for the plot of this episode, I wouldn't say that I struggled with it, although, yeah, I did pretty much struggle with it throughout it, but I think that part of my issue with this is that it's not very clear what exactly Archhammer is doing or what he's planning on doing, because Serling in his opening narration references that he has a master plan to destroy some lives. So when he goes from that to impersonating this musician that was killed in an auto accident, and he goes to the nightclub, speaks to the musician's girlfriend, and you can tell that he's basically exploiting the mourner, and it's a little dark, really, because he's telling her that he wants to run away with her and to meet him at the train station, and they'll make their escape and everything. And then as he leaves, he says to himself, why not a beautiful dame? Never had a dish like that. Why shouldn't I? It's disturbing because he's kind of talking himself up to what is essentially raping her, honestly. And the disconnect with me is that the first time I saw this, because I've seen it a few times now, the first time I saw it though, it made me wonder, are we supposed to infer that he killed the musician? Because going into it from after having heard Serling say that this character has a master plan, I'm thinking that all of these people that he's impersonating are either going to be people that wronged him or people connected to people that wronged him, or that it was going to be some big revenge story, or that these were all going to be interconnected and he was going to basically put together a plan for something. But the musician's girlfriend kind of seems really disconnected from that, from that idea set in place from the opening narration. And I just think it would have been better for me if there was some indication that Arch had killed the musician so that he could get the girl. But there isn't. And I mean, I don't know if that's the intention. I doubt that that we're supposed to read into it that way. But I just feel like it would have been a little bit more connected for me if he had done that. Like maybe when he says that he's never had someone that beautiful, and he's talking himself up to being with her, maybe that could be connected, that he saw the musician and then decided to kill the musician and take his girlfriend, or something to that effect. Or maybe not even kill the musician, just see the girlfriend and capitalize on it, their relationship. I don't know. Then after that, there's a musician in the bar that notices Arch/Johnny, and he approaches him in the street. And once the lighting changes and the musician notices that Arch is Arch, the music that plays, it's like it's intending to be played during the first time we see Arch's ability. And it kind of made me wonder if the script originally opened with that scene with the musician's girlfriend, and maybe the street scene was supposed to be the reveal of his ability. I mean, I can't find anything at all to corroborate that theory or anything. It's just how it played to me in the moment. And I mean, maybe that would have been a more effective way, because we're shown, granted, yes, I do love the mirror scene and how we're shown his ability early on during the narration, but it would have been really interesting if we were brought into this episode with this man sitting down in a nightclub talking to this woman who thinks that he's dead, and he says that they're running away together, and then he goes outside and he has a different face. Like, I think that would have been a more interesting introduction to Arch's story. Of course, then that is just basically just throwing out the entire plot, the entire plot that we got, and it would need to change the dynamic and the through line of what Arch is doing. But I just think that was a missed opportunity. So after Arch speaks to Johnny's girlfriend, he changes his face into that of Virgil Sterig, a gangster who was recently gunned down. And This is the only part of the story where the line of him having a master plan seems to come into play. He goes to speak to a gangster, and that's when he gets money. Basically, it's he's extorting him for money. And at first, I was really into it because this was the second person that he's impersonated who has died, and this is the second time that a character is just flabbergasted about seeing him. And I just like the idea of him taking on the identities of the dead. I think that's clever. And granted, he does change his personality and I feel like there's more off the page in this story, really, because he is taking on the personas and the mannerisms, I assume, of these characters that he's changing into their faces. It's as if he knows their backstory. Like, he goes and he speaks to this gangster and he talks about how, yeah, you left me in the river. I had to deliver something for you. I delivered it for you. Now I need my money and all that stuff. I don't imagine that the inner workings of the gangster lifestyle and everything were in that newspaper article. I don't know. I mean, granted, obviously there's some prep time involved before the timeline of the episode and everything, so maybe I'm just picking nits here, but it's just, I don't know. I just wish that the episode would have explored it a little more. Like his plan a little more, but that's neither here nor there. What I appreciated about him taking on the identities of the dead, despite him taking on their mannerisms and everything, is that the shock of seeing him would either way make the people talking to him ignore any idiosyncrasies that he has. And I think that would have been an interesting angle to play, that there was really no need for him to take on the personality traits of the people, and that maybe they could have played with that and explored that a little bit more too. But this scene is fine. He gets to have some fun. He gets the money from the gangster, and then there's an exciting foot chase. And I mean, it's fun. It's fun. It's suspenseful. It brings some good suspense to the mystery of what he's planning, basically. And I love the irony of what happens next, because he's forced to change into a face that's on a poster next to him to evade capture from these gangsters. And it just happens to be the son of the man working at the newsstand outside of the alley that he's in. In this scene with Peter Bracco, where he's playing Mr. Marshak, he's recognizing his son, his performance is astounding. I absolutely love the way that he brings so much power to the performance and such emotion to it, because he slowly, like, he plays it as a shocked reaction to seeing his son, and then it just devolves into this raw anger and emotion, and it's kind of haunting the way that at the end of it, when after he's pushed him down and walks away, Mr. Marshak just says, "Look at Andy Marshak, look at the monster, look at my son." I think that is just really powerful, and it sets the stage for the ending very well. And initially I had a problem with the way that he panics trying to think of a face when he's being chased by the gangsters. My gut reaction is, why not just use his normal face? Shouldn't he be able to just transition into his normal face? But then again, they don't really explore a lot in this episode, or they don't really spend a lot of time on the minutia of this superpower or of the character relationships or anything in this episode. So who's to say that he's panicked, his adrenaline is pumping, and the opening narration even said that he discovered this skill at an early age, so maybe he doesn't have the memory of his face as clear in his mind as anyone else does. And plus, this is really, really all set up for Mr. Marshak holding him at gunpoint at the end of the episode. So it's fine, it makes sense, and it was just it just took me out of it on the first viewing, just a little bit. And then the scene with the detective in the hotel is, again, it's fine, but it's just, and maybe I'm just nitpicking, but it just seems like what they're going for is that this world, or this it's a window into this city and of this this world, really, where this guy resides, and he's a con man, and so he's done his prep work and everything. So we're just kind of viewing it in this very small window. So it's kind of a lived-in world and everything. It just doesn't connect with me that well. Like, I kind of wish that it would be like when the detective comes, he just says that they want to take him in for questioning. He doesn't specify what the case is or why he wants to take him into questioning. It's just he just pops up out of nowhere. It's not connected to anything else. And it makes me, I don't know, it just bothers me a little bit. I just wish it was more connected. And you can say that maybe it's because he's a con man and, obviously he has a reputation. And then my response to that would be, why sign his name in the log for the hotel? Why don't just give a fake name? I don't know. It's minor complaints, and I don't know. It's just minor complaints. I got a small kick out of him tricking the detective in the revolving door. I thought that was it was silly, really, but it was kind of a little bit, I guess, clever would be the word for it. Maybe just shy of clever. It was a little silly, and I don't know. It was enjoyable to me. And then that brings us to our climax of the episode, where he's gunned down by Marshak's dad, which I really liked. That tied the episode together pretty well, and I don't have any qualms about that. And it played back onto or it called back to earlier when he was struggling to concentrate when his adrenaline was flowing. So yeah, it was good. I kind of wish that they would have tied it back at the end to the girlfriend of the musician somehow, or done some justice to the master plan to destroy lives part of the opening narration. So, I don't know. I'll get to that in a second, though. As for cultural subtext or the theme of the episode, I really didn't pick up on much subtext in this episode, to be quite honest. It's possible that I completely missed something. I've been known to do that in the past. So, at the end of the day, I just think that The Four of Us Are Dying is an interesting story about a con man getting his comeuppance, really. The irony of him changing into the boxer's face so close to where the disgruntled father of the boxer works is amusing to me. But I don't actually find fault in that. I've picked a lot of nits in this episode and in this review, but I don't find fault in the irony of that. I think that the irony is simply the work of the Twilight Zone itself or some other cosmic or supernatural force. And since Arch's ability is the only fantastical part of the story, I mean, there's room for that kind of interpretation. And maybe I'm reading into it, or this is my own personal interpretation of it, but I say that the Twilight Zone wanted to rid itself of Arch Hammer and orchestrated a series of events that led to his death. And I like that interpretation. But on the other hand, the episode doesn't really give much to be inferred into it. And the episode really doesn't deliver on the promise of Arch having a, quote, master plan to destroy some lives. I don't know. It just kind of colors the episode in disappointment for me. I've watched the episode a few times, like I said, and can't really understand why Arch goes after the musician's girlfriend, other than lust. And really, his plan boils down to just getting money from the gangsters and then absconding to Chicago with a dead man's girlfriend. And that's fine, but to say it's a master plan to destroy some lives, to me, that implies some type of revenge tale. And that's just not what we get. And it kind of left me wanting. But viewing it without those expectations, The Four of Us Are Dying is a pretty solid episode. As I said, it's an interesting story about a con man getting his comeuppance in the Twilight Zone. But aside from that, there isn't much for me to latch on to. I'm not rooting for Arch to succeed. In fact, I'm not sure exactly what he's planning most of the time. And at the end of the day, I appreciate the irony that drives the climax of this story. And I think the directorial choices that were made were to my liking. But other than that, I didn't find much else of note in the episode, except for Mr. Marshak's performance, or his character arc, really. The actor really sold that character well and performed it well. And I mean, really, that was the high point of the episode for me. So overall, I liked it. I thought it was okay. Just wasn't much for me to really dig my teeth into. If you have a different interpretation of it, or if you have or if there's something I'm missing out of it, please feel free to email me, matt@obsessiveviewer.com, and let me know what you think of this episode, because I would love to have a new perspective to watch it in. I've got some trivia about the episode for you guys. So the characters of Hammer, Foster, Starrig, and Marshak, they had all been planned to be performed by one actor using different makeup, but the production crew actually came to the realization that the actor's time wearing makeup and time in makeup would actually exceed that of him being in front of the camera. So that's how they decided to use 4 different actors for the episode. And the hotel real sign in front of Arch Hammer's hotel is an MGM prop. It was originally used in a Mexican street setting in their 1953 film Take the High Ground, starring Richard Widmark and Carl Malden. And also, I forgot to mention this in my review, but it was kind of weird that once the camera pans to the hotel real sign, it just immediately jumps to just a static shot for like a few frames, and it's a little jarring and a little weird. And the concept for the episode, having a character with 4 similar but different looking faces, actually made casting a big challenge. Like I said, they thought that they thought they could use one actor and have the makeup change his appearance, but that was impossible. So the alternative was to call in men with dark hair and brown eyes for casting. And here's actually a quote from Millie Gussie, I think that's how you pronounce it. It's from the Syracuse Post-Standard in December 1959. So here's a quote. "They were all told to dress alike, dark suits, ties, white shirts. I'm sure they all thought they were going to a wedding. When they arrived, we immediately eliminated 2 of them because of their light eyes, and then we changed the interviewing procedure we usually follow. It's our custom to interview each individually. This time, we lined them up in chairs against one wall and allowed them to ask us questions like, what's the story about? Or why will 4 of us be needed for one role? After the questioning period ended, we knew the 4 who were similar enough in drive and ability to play the roles." So I thought that was just a really clever way to go about casting this episode, and a clever solution to what could have been potentially a nightmare of casting. All right, so that's all I got for The 4 of Us Are Dying. And before we move on to my bonus review for the episode, here's a highlight from the 160th episode of The Obsessive Viewer, a weekly movie and TV podcast I host with my friends Mike and Tiny over at obsessiveviewer.com.
Doing his Batman thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they had the big fight. I feel like one more in between there would have been good for establishing a little bit more disdain between the 2.
Yeah.
So
Agreed.
Like, basically, we just got the weigh-in and the match. Like, they needed more...
Yeah.
More conflict throughout it. And
Nice sports reference.
Yes, good job.
right? Yeah, I've seen Creed.
So even your sports reference is a movie reference.
Right. Of course, you can find The Obsessive Viewer on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and at obsessiveviewer.com. And you can find the episode used in this promo at obsessiveviewer.com/OV160. Okay, so my bonus review for this episode is 1976's Logan's Run. It's a science fiction classic, really, that I've never seen, and I really was excited to have an excuse to see it now. Just for reference, I rented it from the Google Play Store for $2.99. So that's where you can find it if you're having trouble finding it. I don't think it's streaming anywhere. I hope not, at least, because I spent $2 on it, $3 on it. So this movie is interesting. It's starts with the title card saying that sometime in the 23rd century, the survivors The survivors of war, overpopulation, and pollution are living in a great domed city sealed away from the forgotten world outside. Here, in an ecologically balanced world, mankind lives only for pleasure, freed by the servo mechanisms which provide everything. There's just one catch. Life must end at 30 unless reborn in the fiery ritual of carousel. So its connection to The Four of Us Are Dying is that the novel, Logan's Run, which was originally published in 1967, was co-written by George Clayton Johnson, who wrote the short story that was the basis for The Four of Us Are Dying, and William F. Nolan. So that's the connection there. And it's also an interesting pseudo-connection that Rod Serling had originally written for the Twilight Zone. Like, the original pilot for the Twilight Zone was a story called The Happy Place that described a society where people were executed when they turned 60 years old. And I don't think that was ever filmed. I know it wasn't ever filmed, but I would love to read that. I wonder if that's available anywhere. I don't believe it was filmed. Anyway, music for the movie is one thing that really stood out to me. It's by Jared Goldsmith, and just there's this electronic sound. I know hardly anything about music, but there's an electronic kind of synthy sound that's really good background noise for the world that they're building in this movie. And there's some really cool establishing shots of the city, and I mean, I assume that they use miniatures for it because it's massive. It's really impressive how they did it, or how it's portrayed on screen. It's a little dated, but I mean, that's to be expected, I guess. I just loved how little they had to explain the rules of this world and this mythology and everything, because you're introduced to Michael York as Logan and his friend Francis, who they're what they call sandmen, who they basically go and eliminate people who are running. Like, they're called runners, people that don't want to die at 30. And yeah, I thought that was an interesting introduction to it, and a good, easy way to introduce us to this world. And we're shown a depiction of carousel, which is this ritualistic thing that's supposed to mean rebirth, and people are being reborn in this, and it's pretty obvious that it's not really the case. And it just really goes to show the level of indoctrination and just how into this universe people are, or into these rituals in this world and this society that the people are. And it made me kind of question, I didn't know much about the actual plot, so it made me kind of question how Logan, like, what was going to be Logan's breaking point? Like, what was, because I knew that it was about, the title of the movie is Logan's Run, so I was wondering if it would just be self-preservation, or if there was something that changed his view of everything. And that's not really the case. It's actually interesting. There's kind of an undercover kind of thing that he's assigned, basically, to do this, to find this underground society, basically. And I won't go into too much detail about it, because this is going to be a brief review and everything. So my expectations of it, I didn't really have, I mean, I had some expectations for it, but they weren't really that high. But I enjoyed it for the most part. There were some parts of it that were just so weird and out there, and almost like a psychedelic kind of vibe. It was weird. Like, there's this long interlude where they're in this kind of hedonistic, or this dark, clubby sex area that Logan's running through. It's just weird, and it's just off-putting. It kind of took me out of it. And then earlier, like in the first 15 minutes of the movie, Logan and Francis they're chasing a runner, and there's something about I think they were they were clearly taunting the runner, but it's weird because it cuts from the runner to just tight shots of their faces, each saying, I think they said "run, runner," and it's really weird. They have such looks of they have such gleeful expressions on their face, and it was really kind of weird and jarring. I think the intention was that it was supposed to show how ingrained in this, or how much joy they get out of their job, and how ingrained into this mythology they are and everything. But I kind of chalked it up to possibly poor directing or poor editing. It was just weird for me. So as the movie progresses, it got better for me. I enjoyed what it was doing, and there's a kind of a, I don't want to give it away, but in the about about 3/4 through the movie, there is a development where they reach a destination. That's when the movie kind of really clicked with me. It kind of had a little bit of a Planet of the Apes vibe to it, and I really, really loved the set design and the way that they interacted with certain elements in this new environment. It was just kind of awe-inspiring. It really kind of elevated the movie for me, because it made me realize just how well they had established the mythology and the universe and the world in this story, by doing so little, really. In so little screen time, they had developed this entire world, this entire society, and then when they reach a certain point, when they gain some insight, it's just kind of mind-blowing. It's so honest and authentic. The way that they respond to certain things and certain characters that they meet. There's a character that's introduced late in the movie who plays a very pivotal role in the ending. And there's some certain elements to the character that would potentially require just a little bit of quirk from the actor, but I feel like the actor kind of went a little bit too quirky for me, but it's a minor nitpick. By the end, I won't say what happens, because I want to keep these bonus reviews kind of spoiler free for people to check out the stuff that I review here. But the ending was just really kind of powerful to me. It really made me appreciate the movie more, and it really kind of tied it together for me. There's a very cathartic moment and the very kind of powerful scene where I won't give away what it is, but there's a very powerful scene at the end that the movie ends on, and it really made me reflect on what I'd seen. And yeah, that's about all I've got on Logan's Run. It was kind of interesting and kind of funny and kind of alarming to see this movie at this time in my life, because right now I'm 29, and here in about a month and a half I'm going to turn 30. So that was interesting to see a movie about people that die when they're 30. But and that was kind of a running subtext throughout the movie, is life ends at 30 in this society, and the kind of subtext of that is that youth ends at 30, and 30 is when you kind of get your stuff together and all that. And I mean, I hope so. We'll see in a month. But it was good. It was good, not quite what I was expecting, and some elements of it were very satisfying, while others were a little bit hard to take in. I feel like I will get a much better appreciation for it when I see it again at some point. However, it was just a little bit dated and a little bizarre. And I'll end this bonus segment on this, but it was actually Logan's Run that was the inspiration for one of my favorite episodes of Community. I think it was season 5, the app development episode. I can't remember the exact title, but the episode is the Meow Meow Beans episode, where the school is consumed by this app where you rate people. And the episode devolved into kind of a Logan's Run type of story with similar set design and stuff like that. So, and it followed the Logan's Run aesthetic. So check that out if you haven't seen it already. It's on, I think season 5's on Hulu. And yeah, that about does it for this week's episode of Anthology. This is episode 8, and you can check the show notes for more information on where you can find all the other stuff that I do online. And if you want to see the full show notes, like if your app that you're using to listen to this doesn't have hyperlinks or whatever, you can go to anthologypod.com/008. And that goes for every other episode of the podcast. It's episode or anthologypod.com/ whatever the number of the episode is. So, having said that, thank you for listening. Next week, I'm going to be reviewing episode 14 of season 1 of the Twilight Zone. It's Third from the Sun, which I'm really looking forward to. And I'm also, as a bonus to that, and I'm also very excited for this, I'm going to be reviewing Now is Tomorrow, which is a 1958 pilot episode for a sci-fi anthology series that never aired. It was written by Richard Matheson. You can find it in its entirety. I think there's 1 or 2 or maybe 3 different parts of it, but you can find it on YouTube. I'll put the links in the show notes on this page. So check out your app or go to anthologypod.com/008 for the links to that. But I'm really looking forward to it. I don't know what to expect, but hopefully it's good and worth podcasting about. All right. Well, thanks again for listening, and I'll see you guys next week. Thank you for listening to Anthology, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find past episodes of the show at anthologypod.com, and please subscribe on iTunes and leave a rating and review. It helps the show out more than you might think. Of course, I crave feedback or conversation of any kind from the audience, so please email your thoughts and feelings about the show to matt@obsessiveviewer.com, or you can tweet me @obsessiveviewer, and make sure you like the Facebook page at facebook.com/anthologypod. Of course, you can also leave me a voicemail at 317-762-6099 for a chance to have it played on the show. If you like what you've heard here, I urge you to check out The Obsessive Viewer, a weekly movie and TV podcast I host with my friends Tiny and Mike. Also check out the Obsessive Viewer blog at obsessiveviewer.com, where I write movie reviews, TV reviews, and the occasional editorial about the business of entertainment. You can find all of that at obsessiveviewer.com. If you want even more obsessive content in your life, subscribe to the Obsessive Viewer subreddit at r/obsessiveviewer, and check out obsessivebooknerd.com for book reviews, author spotlights, and a general celebration of reading. Finally, if you're philosophically curious, check out my friend Tiny's side project podcast, The Secular Perspective, which explores the concepts of faith, religion, and existence from the perspective of secular hosts. You can find that at thesecularperspective.com. Once again, thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.